3:14 in the morning. A Se-vome Khordad air defense system tracked an American F-35 Lightning II fighter over the Strait of Hormuz. This was not a routine patrol. The American pilot had just crossed a digital line that did not exist on any international map. In the humid darkness of a coastal bunker, Commander Rezaei watched the glowing green symbol on his console. Would he be the man who started a war that no one wanted? The air inside the bunker smelled of salt and recycled cooling fans. It was a reinforced concrete shell hidden beneath the jagged cliffs of the Iranian coast. For years, the radar crews had practiced for this moment. They had tracked thousands of flights. Most were commercial tankers, some were military. All had stayed within the recognized corridors. This one was different. 3:15 in the morning. The target was flying at 28,000 feet. It moved at Mach 0.9. On the screen, the F-35 appeared as a flickering ghost. It was a stealth aircraft designed to be invisible to older sensors. But the Se-vome Khordad was a modern indigenous system. At this range, the ghost was becoming a solid reality. A voice crackled through the secure line from Tehran. It was the political officer. His tone was sharp. "Commander, you have a solid track. Confirm." Rezaei did not answer immediately. He adjusted the gain on his display. His eyes followed the trajectory. "I have a track," he said. "The target has entered the restricted zone." The officer responded quickly. "Then, you know your orders. Engage the fire control radar. Lock the target. Do not let it escape." Rezaei hesitated. His hand hovered over the console. Locking an American stealth fighter was not a simple tactical move. It was an act of aggression. It would trigger sensors in the American cockpit. It would alert the entire carrier strike group located 60 miles to the south. Once the radar painted that aircraft, the clock would start ticking for everyone in the region. 3:16 in the morning. The commander looked at his junior technician. The young man was pale. His fingers trembled slightly as he maintained the track. They were part of a coastal defense battery near Bandar Abbas. They were the first line of defense. They were also the most exposed. Rezaei spoke into the headset. "Tehran, the target is staying on a steady course. It may be a navigational error. I am requesting permission to issue a radio warning before locking." The response from the political officer was cold. "Negative. A warning gives them time to maneuver. We have the advantage of surprise. Lock the target now. We must show them the cost of their arrogance." Rezaei looked back at the screen. The flickering green icon was now deep inside the exclusion zone. To the Americans, this was international airspace. To the men in this bunker, it was sovereign territory. The difference between those two definitions was measured in seconds and lives. Rezaei reached for the fire control switch. It was a physical toggle protected by a spring-loaded plastic guard. He flipped the guard up. His thumb rested on the cold metal. He could feel the vibration of the heavy generators beneath the floor. High above, the sky was a deep and empty black. The American pilot was likely looking at a clear horizon. He had no idea that a lethal beam of energy was about to find him. He had no idea that a single finger was all that stood between a routine flight and a catastrophic explosion. The morning was still quiet. It would not stay that way. 3:17 in the morning. Tehran. Inside a climate-controlled command center, the advisor leaned over a glass map. He was 600 miles away from the salt-crusted cliffs of the coast. On his screen, a mirrored feed of Commander Rezaei's radar showed the same flickering ghost. To the advisor, the F-35 was not an aircraft. It was a political lever. It was an opportunity to prove that the new defensive systems were worth the billions of rials invested in them. The advisor spoke into the encrypted link. "Commander, you have the solution. Why is the fire control radar still silent?" Rezaei's voice came through the speaker. It was distorted by the distance. "The target is at 28,000 feet. It is not descending. It is not changing heading. This is a transit profile. If I lock it now, I lose the element of surprise for a target that may just be lost." "It is not lost," the advisor replied. His voice was smooth and dangerous. "It is testing us. They want to see if we have the stomach to defend our lines. If you let it pass, you are telling the Americans that our sovereignty is a suggestion. Engage the lock. 3:18 in the morning. Back in the bunker, the humidity seemed to thicken. The air conditioning unit groaned but failed to move the heavy air. Rezaei looked at his junior technician. The young man's eyes were fixed on the countdown timer for the missile battery. The Se-vome Khordad was ready. The 3 missiles on the transporter erector launcher outside were already angled toward the black sky. Rezaei spoke to his crew. Initiate the X-band array. Low power pulse. We will paint him and see how he reacts. The technician's hands moved across the keyboard. Initiating. Array is active. We are emitting. 3:19 in the morning. It was the high-pitched hum of the targeting computer. On the main display, the flickering green ghost suddenly turned into a solid red diamond. The system had found a lock. The radar waves were bouncing off the specialized skin of the F-35 and returning to the bunker with lethal precision. The advisor's voice returned. He sounded satisfied. Confirmed. You have a hard lock. The Americans will be seeing Christmas lights in their cockpit right now. What is the target doing? Rezaei watched the red diamond. The target is reacting. It is banking left. High G-turn. It is deploying electronic countermeasures. My screen is washing out. Burn through it, the advisor commanded. Increase power to the array. Do not let that diamond break. If he attempts to flee, you are clear to fire. 3:20 in the morning. 60 miles away, the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group came to life. In the Combat Information Center, the radar operators saw the sudden spike in energy from the Iranian coast. They knew that frequency. They knew exactly what it meant. One of their pilots was currently being stared at by a loaded gun. Inside the bunker, the red diamond flickered. The American pilot was fighting back with every digital tool at his disposal. The room felt like it was shrinking. The technician shouted over the hum of the electronics. "Commander, I am losing the track. The jamming is too intense." Rezaei stepped closer to the screen. His thumb was still resting on the trigger guard. Do not lose him. If we lose the lock now, he will think we are weak. Tehran. I am losing the targeting solution. The advisor's voice was no longer smooth. It was a bark. Then fire now, before the window closes. Launch the first missile. That is an order. Rezaei looked at the button. He looked at the red diamond, which was now dancing on the edge of the screen. He had 5 seconds before the target vanished into the noise of the jamming. The commander's finger tightened on the cold metal of the trigger. 3:21 in the morning. The cockpit of the F-35 Lightning II was a silent world of dark glass and green light. Major Elias Thorne, callsign Raven 11, sat encased in the most advanced flying machine ever built. Below him, the Persian Gulf was a black void. Above him, the stars were cold and distant. He was flying a routine track that had been cleared by his command. But as he crossed the imaginary line designated as the southern boundary of the strait, the world changed. A sharp, rhythmic chirp echoed in his helmet. On his panoramic cockpit display, a small yellow icon appeared. It was a diamond with a numerical tag. Thorne did not flinch. He adjusted the oxygen mask on his face. He felt the familiar pressure of the flight suit against his legs. Magic. This is Raven 11, he said into the radio. I am being painted. Bearing 030. Source looks like a land-based array. The response from the E-3 Sentry aircraft flying 300 miles away was immediate. Raven. Magic. We see the emission. It is a Khordad battery. Be advised. They are in high-power search mode. 3:23 in the morning. The chirp in Thorne's ear turned into a continuous, high-pitched warble. The yellow diamond on his screen turned red. It began to flash. The F-35 was no longer just being searched for. It was being targeted. Magic. Raven 11. I have a hard lock, Thorne said. His voice was flat. Professional. I am initiating defensive maneuvers. Braking left. Deploying digital masking. Thorne pulled the stick. The G-forces pressed him into his seat. He was not just turning a plane. He was trying to confuse a computer 100 miles away. His aircraft was emitting thousands of false signals every second. It was creating a digital ghost of itself. He wanted the Iranian radar to see 10 planes, or no planes at all. Inside the helmet, the digital display projected onto his visor showed the threat. The radar beam from the coast was like a searchlight in a dark room. He was trying to stay in the shadows of that beam. 3:25 in the morning. Raven. Magic. The battery has shifted to fire control frequency, the controller warned. You are inside their engagement envelope. Do you have a visual on any launches? Thorne looked out at the black horizon. He saw nothing but the dim glow of coastal cities in the distance. No orange streaks, no plumes of fire. Not yet. Negative on launch, Thorne replied. He checked his weapon status. His internal bays held 2 AIM-120D missiles. He could kill that battery before its missile reached the halfway point, but those were not his orders. He was a scout, not an assassin. He felt the sweat beginning to pool under his flight suit. His heart rate was 72 beats per minute. He had trained for this 1,000 times, but the simulator did not have the smell of ozone. The simulator did not have the weight of a potential regional conflict resting on a single trigger pull. The F-35 groaned as Thorne pushed it to Mach 1.2. He was climbing. He wanted the altitude. If a missile came, he needed the energy to outrace it. The red diamond on his screen was still solid. The Iranian commander on the ground was not letting go. They were locked in a digital duel. One man was trying to stay invisible. The other was trying to pull the trigger. The lock remained. The tone in his ear stayed constant. It was the sound of a countdown. 3:26 in the morning. The Combat Information Center of the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln was a cathedral of blue light and hushed voices. Admiral Vance stood behind the radar consoles. He watched the master air gallery. A jagged red line connected a dot on the Iranian coast to the blinking icon of Raven 11. In the modern age, war did not start with a bugle call. It started with a frequency shift on a digital display. The Combat Information Center, or the CIC, was now the most important room in the world. The admiral turned to his weapons officer. What is the status of the battery? The officer did not look up from his screen. Source is a Se-vome Khordad. It is a high-power engagement. They have a solid track on Major Thorne. They are not just watching him. They are preparing to kill him. They are preparing to kill him. 3:28 in the morning. The tension in the room was a physical weight. On the other side of the strike group, the guided missile cruiser USS Mobile Bay sat low in the water. It was the primary air defense commando. Its Aegis combat system was already slave to the F-35's data link. If a missile launched from the coast, the cruiser would know within 2 seconds. Red Crown. This is Lincoln, the admiral said into the FleetNet. What are our rules of engagement? The response from the cruiser was immediate. Admiral, rules are unchanged. We are in international airspace. We cannot fire unless fired upon. Major Thorne is cleared to use defensive countermeasures only. The Major is sitting in a kill zone, Vance muttered. He looked at the clock. Every second that the Iranian radar stayed locked was a second closer to a mistake. Tell Thorne to stay the course. Do not deviate. If he turns tail now, they will think they can push us out. The Strait, whenever they want. 3:29 in the morning. Inside the cockpit of the F-35, Major Thorne felt the world narrowing. The red diamond on his visor was a constant, pulsing threat. The high-pitched warble in his ears was designed to be annoying. It was designed to stress the pilot. It was working. Magic. Raven 11, Thorne said. The lock is tightening. I am seeing an increase in signal strength. They are bore-sighting me. Requesting permission to active jam the array. Negative. Raven, the controller replied. Active jamming is an escalation. Maintain passive stealth. You are a ghost. Stay a ghost. Thorne gripped the throttle. He was flying at 32,000 feet now. The air was thin. The stars above were bright and unblinking. Below him, he could see the faint lights of the Iranian coastline. He knew that somewhere in those dark hills, men were looking at him through a digital lens. They were waiting for a reason. 3:30 in the morning. The Iranian battery was not backing down. It was a game of nerves. The F-35 was a multi-billion-dollar piece of technology, but at this moment, it was just a target. Thorne checked his fuel. He had enough for another 20 minutes on station. I am holding steady, Thorne whispered to himself. He was talking to the aircraft as much as the controllers. Give me a reason to stay. The radar warning receiver suddenly changed pitch. It was no longer a warble. It was a scream. The Iranian battery had just entered the final stage of the launch sequence. The missile was not in the air yet, but the computer on the ground was now talking directly to the interceptor on the rail. The window of peace was closing. Both sides were now committed to a path that had no easy exit. 3:31 in the morning. The command bunker beneath the Iranian cliffs was vibrating. The high-power generators were running at maximum capacity to feed the cooling systems of the X-band radar. On the main console, the red diamond, representing the American F-35, was no longer flickering. It was a solid, unwavering mark of death. The computer had calculated a 92% probability of a kill. In Tehran, the advisor's voice was a low hiss over the secure line. Commander Rezaei, you have the solution. The target is deep within our sovereign air. If you do not fire now, you are failing your country. The window is closing. Clear to fire. I say again, you are clear to fire. Rezaei did not move. His eyes were fixed on the tactical display. He saw the American aircraft's speed increasing. It was trying to run. But the missiles on his launcher were faster. They could reach Mach 4 in seconds. 3:32 in the morning. Inside the cockpit of Raven 11, Major Thorne felt the world shrinking to the size of his visor. The audio warning in his ears was now a continuous, soul-shredding shriek. It was the stare tone. It meant the ground radar was no longer just looking at him. It was providing a constant stream of data to a missile that was waiting for the signal to ignite. Magic, Raven 11, Thorne said. His voice was tight, strained by the G-forces, as he pulled the aircraft into a steep climb. The battery is at maximum power. I am seeing launch-enable signals. Requesting permission to engage with HARM missiles. Negative. Raven. The controller's voice came back, equally tense. Hold your fire. We have a global audience. If you fire first, we are the aggressors. Stand by for defensive deployment. On the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln, the atmosphere was electric. The Admiral watched the data link. He knew that in the next 60 seconds, he could lose a $60 million aircraft and a highly trained pilot. Or he could start a war that would burn across the entire Middle East. 3:33 in the morning. Back in the bunker, the junior technician looked up at Rezaei. His face was slick with sweat. Commander, the system is slaved. The missiles are tracking the target's movement on the rail. All I need is the final confirmation. The advisor in Tehran spoke again. There was no longer any room for debate in his tone. Commander Rezaei, this is a direct order from the High Command. Do not let that aircraft escape. Fire. Now. Rezaei felt the weight of the world on his right thumb. He looked at the red diamond. He looked at the technician. Outside, in the humid, night air, the hydraulic arms of the launcher hissed as they made a final 2-degree adjustment. The missiles were pointed at a spot in the sky where the American pilot would be in exactly 14 seconds. All stations, Rezaei whispered. Final countdown. 5, 4. The room went silent. The only sound was the electronic hum of the radar and the distant thud of the sea against the cliffs. The commander's finger moved to the trigger. He could feel the click of the safety mechanism. The morning was about to explode into 1,000 pieces of burning metal. 3:34 in the morning. The bunker was a tomb of high-frequency noise. Commander Rezaei felt the sweat stinging his eyes. His right thumb pressed against the red launch button. It was a heavy industrial switch. It required 5 pounds of pressure to engage. He had already applied 4. The safety was off. The internal thermal batteries of the 3 missiles outside were already melting their chemical cores to provide power for the flight. 3, 2, Rezaei whispered. In Tehran, the advisor was leaning so close to his microphone that his breathing sounded like a storm. Fire. Confirm launch. Fire now. 3:34 in the morning and 15 seconds. Inside the cockpit of Raven 11, Major Thorne saw the world turn red. His helmet-mounted display was flashing a single word in capital letters: release. The Iranian system had transitioned from a track-while-scan mode to a continuous wave illumination. This was the final step. The next event in the sequence was the physical departure of a missile from its rail. Magic. Raven 11. "I have a shot line," Thorne shouted. His voice was strained. He was pulling 6 Gs in a desperate spiral. "The battery is hot. I am deploying flares and chaff. I am defensive. If they launch, I am engaging the source." 3:34 in the morning and 30 seconds. On the bridge of the USS Abraham Lincoln, Admiral Vance watched the remote feed from Thorne's nose camera. The screen was a chaotic blur of horizon and black sky. "Steady," Vance said to the empty room. "Hold the line, Major. Do not be the one who fires first." The Admiral knew the math. If the Iranian commander pushed that button, Thorne would have 12 seconds to live. If Thorne fired his HARM missile now to save himself, the Iranian battery would be a crater in 20 seconds. Either way, the war would start in 3:34 in the morning and 45 seconds. In the bunker, Rezaei's thumb trembled. The red diamond on his screen was perfectly centered. The tone in his headset was a solid, piercing note. It was the sound of a perfect kill. All he had to do was move his thumb a fraction of an inch. The technician screamed, "Commander, we have a solid lock. The target is out of energy. He cannot turn anymore." Fire. Rezaei looked at the countdown clock on his secondary monitor. It showed the time remaining until the F-35 would pass behind a coastal ridge and break the line of sight. 7 seconds. 7. Rezaei saw the advisor's face in his mind. He saw the medals. He saw the office in Tehran. 6. He looked at the junior technician. The boy was barely 20 years old. He was terrified. 5. Rezaei felt the cold metal of the button. He thought about the carrier 60 miles away. He thought about the return fire that would follow his launch. 4. The F-35 was beginning its final dive. 3. The advisor's voice was a scream now. Rezaei. Fire. 2. Rezaei's thumb tightened. The plastic casing of the button creaked. 1. Then, 3:35 in the morning. The pressure on the launch button was almost at the breaking point. Commander Rezaei looked at the red diamond on his primary screen one last time. But then, a ghost appeared. Not a digital ghost created by the F-35, a real one. On the wide area search radar, a new contact flickered into existence. It was 30 miles behind the American fighter, trailing on the same bearing. It was large, it was slow. It was squawking a civilian transponder code. Rezaei froze. His eyes darted to the altitude reading. The new contact was at 31,000 feet. It was an Emirates Airbus A380 en route from Dubai to Tehran. It was a flight with 400 civilians on board. Tehran. Break. Break, Rezaei shouted into his headset. I have a civilian overlap. Emirates Flight 812 is entering the engagement corridor. It is directly behind the target. The advisor's voice was instantaneous. Ignore it. The missile will track the high-speed target. The F-35 is the threat. Fire. 3:35 in the morning and 15 seconds. Rezaei looked at the geometry of the intercept. The Se-vome Khordad missile used a semi-active radar homing seeker. It followed the reflection of the ground radar off the target. But at this range, with the jamming from the American fighter, the radar beam was wide. If the F-35 maneuvered at the last second, the missile's proximity fuse could easily lock onto the massive metal signature of the airliner. I cannot fire, Rezaei said. His voice was no longer a whisper. It was a command. The risk of a collateral intercept is 100%. If we launch, we kill that airliner. You have an order, Commander, the advisor screamed. Rezaei ignored him. He looked at the technician. Power down the fire control array. Now, return to search mode only. Drop the lock. The technician did not hesitate. He hit the override. The high-pitched shriek of the targeting system died instantly. The room was suddenly deafeningly quiet. 3:35 in the morning and 30 seconds. Inside the cockpit of Raven 11, the change was violent. The screaming warning in Major Thorne's ears stopped. The red flashing release command on his visor turned back into a steady green navigation symbol. The sudden silence was more terrifying than the noise. Magic. Raven 11, Thorne said. He was breathing hard. The lock is gone. The battery just went cold. I am clear. Repeat. I am clear. Copy. Raven, the controller replied. We see the Emirates flight on our glass. They saw it too. You are clear. To egress the zone. Turn south. Get out of there. Thorne did not need to be told twice. He banked the F-35 away from the coast. He looked over his shoulder. He could see the lights of the Emirates airliner passing high above him. The pilot of that plane had no idea that 400 people had just lived through a 7-second window of total annihilation. 3:35 in the morning and 45 seconds. In the bunker, Rezaei took his hand off the trigger guard. He had been applying. He sat back in his chair. The adrenaline was leaving his system, replaced by a cold, hollow realization. The advisor's voice came through the headset, low and venomous. You will answer for this, Commander. You let him go. Rezaei looked at the screen. The American fighter was moving away. The airliner was safe. I did not let him go, Rezaei said quietly. I saved us from a mistake we could never take back. The crisis had peaked, but the silence in the bunker felt like the start of a different kind of war. 3:36 in the morning. The silence inside the bunker was heavier than the noise that had preceded it. Commander Rezaei sat back in his steel chair. His chest rose and fell in shallow, jagged breaths. On the primary tactical display, the red diamond was gone. It had been replaced by a soft blue circle. The system was back in passive search mode. It was no longer a weapon. It was once again just an observer. The junior technician stared at his hands. They were still hovering over the keyboard. He looked at the commander. He did not speak. There was nothing to say. They had stood on the edge of a cliff and looked into the drop. 3:38 in the morning. The advisor's voice returned to the headset. It was no longer screaming. It was a cold, measured tone that felt like a blade. Commander Rezaei, you have disregarded a direct order from the capital. You have allowed a violator of our airspace to retreat without consequence. Secure your station. A relief team is being dispatched from Bandar Abbas. You will surrender your sidearm upon their arrival. Rezaei did not argue. He reached up and slowly unplugged his headset. He laid it on the console. He looked at the screen one last time. The American F-35 was now 40 miles away. It was moving south at Mach 1.4. It was leaving the restricted zone. It was leaving the danger behind. 3:40 in the morning. Inside the cockpit of Raven 11, Major Thorne felt the adrenaline beginning to crash. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing. He looked at his fuel gauge. He had used a significant amount of JP-8 fuel during the high-G maneuvers and the afterburner climb. Magic. Raven 11, Thorne said. I am established on the exit vector, requesting a tanker rendezvous at Point Alpha. I am low on fuel. Copy, Raven, the controller replied. We have a KC-135 orbiting at 20,000 feet. Vectoring you now. Nice work out there, Major. The Admiral wants to see your sensor logs the moment you trap on the deck. Thorne did not feel like he had done nice work. He felt like a man who had just survived a car crash. He looked down at the dark water of the Gulf. Somewhere down there, a man had decided not to kill him. He didn't know why. He didn't know about the Emirates airliner. He only knew that the screaming in his ears had stopped just in time. 3:42 in the morning. On the bridge of the USS Abraham Lincoln, the atmosphere was shifting from crisis to calculation. The Admiral watched the long-range radar. The Iranian battery remained cold. No other coastal sites had activated their fire control systems. The provocation was over. He blinked, the weapons officer whispered. Admiral Vance shook his head. No, he chose. There is a difference. The Admiral turned to his Chief of Staff. Get me a secure line to the Pentagon. We need to report this immediately. The Iranians have a lock-on capability we didn't fully account for. Their response time was less than 4 seconds. But more importantly, Someone in that bunker has a very cool head. We need to know who he is. 3:45 in the morning. The heavy steel door at the back of the bunker hissed open. Two men in dark uniforms entered. They did not look at the displays. They walked straight to Rezaei. The commander stood up. He felt the weight of his years in the military. He unclipped his holster and placed his pistol on the desk. He looked at the blue circle on the radar screen. The Emirates airliner was now safely over Iranian land. It was descending toward Tehran. 400 people were about to go home to their families. The target is clear, Rezaei said to the lead officer. The officer did not respond. He gestured toward the door. Rezaei walked out of the bunker and into the humid night air. The smell of the sea was strong. The stars were still bright. The crisis of the 7-second window was over. The geopolitical fallout was only beginning. 4:45 in the morning. Washington, District of Columbia. The sun was still hours away from rising over the Potomac River. Inside the National Military Command Center, the atmosphere was clinical and cold. High-definition screens displayed a playback of the engagement in the Strait of Hormuz. A group of analysts, in suits and uniforms, watched the red and blue icons dance across the digital map. A brigadier general pointed at the screen. There. Look at the signature. The F-35 was fully illuminated for 18 seconds. The Iranian system had a high-confidence track. By all our metrics, that should have been a launch. A civilian intelligence officer leaned forward. But it wasn't. They held. Why? Electronic warfare? The general asked. Did Thorne's jamming break the lock? The officer shook his head. Negative. We have the sensor logs from Raven 1-1. The lock stayed solid until the battery went cold. They didn't lose him. They let him go. The room was silent for a moment. In the world of high-stakes geopolitics, a non-event was often more terrifying than an event. It suggested a level of discipline and calculation that changed the entire strategic picture. They were testing us, the general muttered. Or we were testing them. Either way, we now know that their indigenous radar can find a Lightning II at that range. That is a significant intelligence shift. 5 o'clock in the morning. Tehran. The advisor stood in a hallway of polished stone and dark wood. He was no longer shouting. He was waiting. At the end of the hall, a set of heavy doors opened. A high-ranking officer emerged. His face was unreadable. The commander has been processed, the officer said. He is being held at the Naval headquarters in Bandar Abbas. The advisor tightened his grip on a leather folder. He should be court-martialed for cowardice. He had the target. He had the order. He hesitated for 7 seconds. The officer stopped and looked at the advisor. He didn't hesitate. He calculated. If he had fired, the debris from the F-35 would have been the least of our problems. The Emirates flight was in the kill zone. We would have spent the next decade explaining why we shot down 400 civilians in our own backyard. The Americans would have been blamed, the advisor countered. They shouldn't have been there. The world does not work that way anymore, the officer replied. The commander saved the reputation of the Islamic Republic. He showed that we are a professional force, not a hair-trigger militia. The High Command is currently debating his future. Do not be surprised if he is not punished as severely as you wish. The advisor felt a surge of anger. And the Americans? They now know our frequencies. They know we can see them. They will adapt. And so will we, the officer said. This was a laboratory for the next war. Both sides learned what they needed to know. The sky over the strait is no longer a mystery. 5:15 in the morning. The strategic assessment was clear on both sides. The incident would not be reported in the morning news. There would be no official protests or heated press conferences. It would remain a ghost in the classified files of two nations. But in the corridors of power, the map had changed. The line in the sand had been drawn, crossed, and erased. Both sides now knew exactly how close the other was willing to go. They knew the speed of the radar. They knew the weight of the trigger. The morning was beginning to break over the horizon. The world was at peace, but it was a fragile, calculated peace. It was held together by the memory of 7 seconds that almost ended it all. 8 in the morning, 3 days later. The Persian Gulf. The flight deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln was a hive of controlled chaos. Yellow-shirted handlers moved with practiced precision as they prepared the morning's first launch cycle. Major Elias Thorne stood on the catwalk, leaning against the cold steel railing. He watched a pair of F-18 Super Hornets catch the wire and slam onto the deck. He was not flying today. He was grounded for a mandatory medical and psychological review. It was standard procedure after a Tier 1 engagement. His flight suit was clean. His helmet was tucked under his arm. But his eyes were fixed on the horizon, toward the invisible line he had crossed 72 hours earlier. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, jagged piece of metal. It was a fragment of a cooling shroud from his own aircraft. It had vibrated loose during the high-G maneuvers in the strait. To anyone else, it was junk. To Thorne, it was a reminder. For 7 seconds, his life had been a mathematical probability. 8:15 in the morning. Bandar Abbas. The coastal city was waking up to a thick, humid haze. In a quiet office overlooking the harbor, Commander Rezaei sat at a wooden desk. He was no longer in his combat bunker. He was no longer wearing the insignia of a battery commander. He had been reassigned to a logistical position at the Naval Academy. He poured a glass of tea. His hands were steady now. He watched a commercial freighter steam slowly toward the horizon. He knew that the American carrier was still prowling. He knew that the F-35 pilots were still flying their tracks. A knock came at his door. A young midshipman entered and placed a folder on his desk. It was a commendation for technical excellence and safety preservation. It was a quiet way for the high command to acknowledge that he had been right, without admitting that the advisor in Tehran had been wrong. Rezaei did not open the folder. He simply thanked the young man and went back to his tea. 8:30 in the morning. The Pentagon. A final briefing was being held in a secure vault. The digital map showed the Strait of Hormuz. The ghost line was still there, pulsing in a faint blue light. But the rules of engagement had been updated. The buffer zone had been widened by 5 miles. The takeaway is simple, a senior analyst said to the room. Modern warfare is no longer about who can see the furthest. It is about who can think the clearest under maximum pressure. The Iranian commander did not fire because he saw a tragedy unfolding. Our pilot did not fire because he trusted his training. If either man had been less professional, we would be in the middle of a regional war this morning. The analyst closed the file. The 7-second window is now a mandatory case study for all air defense and strike fighter transitions. We are calling it the Rezaei Thorne limit. It is the point where technology ends and human judgment begins. 9 in the morning. The sun was high over the Gulf now. The water was a sheet of polished turquoise. High above, the vapor trails of a dozen aircraft crisscrossed the sky. They looked like stitches on a wound that was trying to heal. No missiles had flown. No ships had been lost. But the balance of power had shifted. Both nations had looked into the abyss. They had seen the cost of a single finger on a single button. For now, the guns were silent. The radars were in search mode. The world continued to turn, held in place by the restraint of men who knew exactly what they were capable of doing. The morning was quiet. It was the most expensive silence in history.